as well as attachment sites for the tendons and muscles that are essential for locomotion. The skeletal system is comprised of 206 bones, each of which is formed through a process known as ossification. Bone development and remodeling takes place on a continual basis from the prenatal period and early childhood through adulthood, as well as during the healing process that occurs following bone fractures. Ossification can take one of two forms depending on the type of bone that is forming. In the case of flat bones, like those of the ribs, scapula, pelvis, and skull, the ossification process is known as intramembranous ossification. The process is initiated by mesenchymal stem cells, which are cells that have yet to be differentiated into a particular cell type. Eventually, centrally located mesenchymal cells within the embryonic fibrous connective tissue differentiate into bone-forming cells or osteoblasts. This process constitutes the formation of what are called ossification centers. In the matrix formation phase that follows, the osteoblasts begin to lay down osteoid, which is the organic part of the bone, consisting of collagen fibers. Some of the osteoblasts are entrapped within the osteoid and are then said to be osteocytes. The osteoid then calcifies and forms slender, needle-like structures of spongy bone called spicules, which aggregate in the form of small supporting beams or trabeculae. Meanwhile, the blood vessels on the outside of the spongy bone condense and form the periosteum, the fibrous sheath that covers bone. As the trabeculae thicken, an interconnected network forms, resulting in what's called woven bone, which is characterized by a somewhat haphazard organization of collagen fibers and is mechanically weak. Eventually, this leads to the formation of lamellar bone around the newly formed spongy bone. This lamellar or compact bone has regular parallel alignment of collagen in the form of sheets or lamellae and is mechanically quite strong. While flat bones are formed through intramembranous ossification, most bones in the body, such as the long bones of the legs and arms, are formed in a somewhat different manner known as endochondral ossification. This type of bone development involves cartilage models, which are eventually replaced with bony tissue. The process begins in the developing fetus and can be divided into several stages. Around the 8th week of development, chondroblasts begin secreting a cartilaginous matrix that will form the hyaline cartilage model for bone development. As with other hyaline cartilage tissues, chondrocytes are trapped in lacunae and a perichondrium surrounds the model. The next stage begins when chondrocytes within the center of the model hypertrophy and begin to resorb some of the surrounding cartilage matrix. As these chondrocytes enlarge, the matrix begins to calcify and chondrocytes begin to die as nutrients cannot diffuse through the newly formed calcified matrix. Next, stem cells within the perichondrium divide to form osteoblasts, and a compact bone collar is formed around the calcified cartilage shaft. A periosteal bud, consisting of capillary blasts, invades the core of the cartilaginous shaft, forming a primary ossification center. The remains of the calcified cartilage serve as a template on which osteoblasts can build bone. Bone development extends toward the epiphyses from the primary ossification center. Most primary ossification centers are formed by the 12th week of development. The same basic process of primary ossification is repeated in the epiphyses as secondary ossification centers are formed, replacing the calcified cartilage with mostly spongy bone. As the secondary ossification centers are formed, osteoclasts resorb bone within the diaphysis, creating a hollow medullary cavity. When secondary ossification is complete, the cartilage is totally replaced by bone, except in two places. A region of cartilage remains over the surface of the epiphyses as the articular cartilage, and another area of cartilage remains between the epiphyses and diaphysis. This is known as the growth region or epiphyseal plate and is the point from which all growth in bone length occurs. At adulthood, epiphyseal cartilage plates are completely ossified and bone growth stops.
А то, что скрыто внутри, может быть не так заметно всем встречным и всем, кого мы видим, но без сомнения очень важно.